I like to think about the difference between marital and non-marital asset by starting to think about what is a marital asset and then potentially work my way backwards from that. A marital asset is something that has been built together by the parties, even if in completely different ways. The idea that we're thinking about here is that of marital endeavour. So it may be that we have a situation with one of the parties working incredibly hard in an office job, say as a banker, making incredible amounts of money and millions every year. That's absolutely fine. You then have the other party potentially having given up part of their career or not having pursued it to the same level in order to make sure that the family could be looked after. This is often a decision that is made between the parties together, or potentially one of the parties will pressured into it, but this is something that at the end of the day, the relationship evolved around. In these circumstances, the contributions are seen as equal, and that asset remains firmly matrimonial. The classic example of this is the matrimonial home. So even if all the funds come from one of the parties, the reality is that that is the centre of the family life. Both parties contributed to it, even if in unequal ways, and as such it should be considered fully matrimonial. The same principle applies to savings and various other assets that have been accumulating during the marriage: holiday homes, cars, jewellery, etc., etc. The list can go on. What is non-matrimonial generally are assets that do not come from that joint endeavour. The classic example could be funds that have been inherited, funds that have been gifted to very clearly only just one of the parties, funds that have that were already with one of the parties before the relationship began. In order to ensure that these funds remain strictly non-matrimonial, it is important to avoid as much as possible for those funds to have been mingled. The classic example is one where the party is married potentially slightly later in life. One of the party already had their own property. They sold that property, and then with the proceeds of sale, they purchased a new home, where then they went to live with a husband or wife, had children, and then became the new matrimonial home. Ring-fencing that initial investment is very, very tricky. Another classic example is one whereby you had a small company, and then throughout the relationship, that has evolved into a much larger and more valuable one, although the seed capital that was placed into it was mainly yours. These arguments can be difficult to run in both ways, both if you're trying to create very much a scenario, to paint a picture very much whereby funds are matrimonial or non-matrimonial. So it's very important that you've got someone who's got a deep understanding about how companies, for instance, are run and what's the importance of the initial seed capital, but also someone who can trace back funds for a very long time. And this is something that here we are uniquely placed to do, thanks to our forensic team, for example, as well as thanks to our years of experience in doing exactly that.